Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the UB XV130. And you know me, I love micros, it's kind of my thing. So I had to get right on this when it became available to order. And as you can see, mine is dirty. And that's because I've been flying it. I've been flying it and flying it and flying it, and it had to stop now because I no longer have a complete set of stock props that will function as a unit. The set that you see before you now they're nicked up, and I think I've flattened the pitch on a couple of these and it makes a really weird whirring sound, and I think it's this right here. So I can't continue my tune and I can't continue to fly it without changing out the props, and for those of you that'll be buying this unit, that won't be handy. But what I will do is I will post my PID configuration as it stands. It's kind of close. It's always hard to tell when you're kind of close looking at the flight footage. I think it may be within a value of 5 on roll and P, and then you might need to take a deeper look at the D, especially for, I think it was P that was wobbling a bit on hard 180 turns. But it'll get you in the air. If you don't want to do any tuning of your own, it'll be relatively reasonable. But anyways, let's talk more about the copter. So this is apparently from a company called Awesome, and they really go overboard with that kind of anyways. And this one has also caught the eye of some people on RC groups, and there's been a lot of discourse there. You can look that information up on your own. I'm not going to link to it. That's been one of the uglier threads I've seen. You can see I modified my canopy for easy access to the USB port, and that was one of the things I got tired of. Because it doesn't come pre-tuned, I was having to take the canopy and the antenna off every time I wanted to plug in the USB port, and that got a little old. So I took a Dremel and just made a rough cut, and I have my little USB port. I mean, my hole there is a little bit rough, but it actually works out pretty well, because if you see, I plug in my little USB cable. If I can get it in there, come on now. It's not terrible, so it gets the job done. This features an F3 flight controller. It has a micro camera, a CMOS micro camera. The flight controller has an integrated VTX. It's a 40-channel VTX, and it also has inside a stack of 4-in-1 ESCs running BL-HELI-S at 20 amps. Those ESCs do not have braking turned on, so you need to turn that on yourself if that's something that you want. I know I do. I like to fly with motor braking. That way when I let off the throttle, I get a response that I expect. It's kind of odd when they don't come with braking on. Now, I do have another vehicle that doesn't apparently have the ability to have braking on, or I can't figure out which ESCs they are in order to be able to turn that on. And it flies kind of out of control. I find it hard to stop and change direction. But I would highly recommend that you get some more props. Maybe these will become available, but I turned a few of mine inside out. This is probably the worst one, but you know, after you bend them back a few times, they're nice. This one's just kind of dirty, but there must have been something wrong with it at some point in time. These quad blade props, they're fine. They're not great. If you're wanting to get some additional props, I would go with the 3030 Racecrafts. I've been flying these on a 4-inch. Actually been flying the 4-inch version of these on a 4-inch copter, and I like them a lot. I was surprised at how durable they are, and there's some special sauce in there. So to give those a try, I got these from Heli Direct. You can also get them from Ready-Made RC and probably various other places. Just look for Racecraft and then select your prop size. Now this one's currently on special, and you never know about pricing at Banggood. They say the retail price of this is $182 US, and 66 cents. And then they've got it on sale right now for $139. So really the market that they seem to be going after is the same market for these Taros. But there's one big difference between these Taros and this guy, and it's not Awesome that's put on the front. It's the fact that you've got 1306 motors that are running 3900 kV, excuse me. See if I can show that. 3600 kV, I stand corrected. I don't know why I was saying 39. So 1306, 39 kV. These are 1105 motors with what I forget what the ESC is, 6 amp ESCs. So you're running 3S on this as tops. But this you can run 4S on. Now that seems to be a bit of a miss, if they're trying to run 4S and they include a micro JST. I'm not a big fan of these because you can't find many battery options on there, so you're going to have to fashion a adapter. Some people got this in their box. I did not, so I had to make my own, which you can see here I did. And I'll say right off the bat, if you're looking at these Taros, whether you're looking at the 120 or the 130, that unless you're really confined in space and going fast or having much lift, this would be the option I would recommend. It has its own flaws, but we'll go over those in just a minute. It's about equal as far as setup goes for each one of these. These are going to be required to add a receiver, and you're going to need to figure out how the battery mounting works and all of those things. But I've got videos on these if you want to look back in the channel and see those. But that seems to be the market they're going after. And I think they've done a reasonable job here. The one thing that I don't like is the carbon fiber has been milled out to allow for these motor wires to go down in there, and that creates a lot of flex. If you can see here, let me just... So that makes possibly tuning hard, and that also means you're going to get prop strikes. And you can see I've got a few back here, and this didn't happen right away. If you're flying hard and you're flying 4S, you may find that you get these naturally just on punch outs. In my case, I got this after I crashed and I forgot to check if I had clearance. You know, after crash, we need to flip our props to make sure everything's okay. I didn't do that, and I had some nicks in flight. I fly pretty close in, and I find these linear antennas work just fine, especially this time of the year where there's very little vegetation on the trees and on the bushes. Here it's winter time, so you'll see in the flight footage that this works just fine. You can go for a circular polarized antenna, that's fine there. That's just freedom of choice. They do include something for you. The CMOS camera on one of my flights, and it's probably rolling right up here. I smacked the swing set dead on and knocked that loose, and it's just glued in a little bit of hot glue. And as you can see, there's really no other damage to this. I have a feeling that despite the fact that we don't have a lot of carbon fiber and it's not very thick, this unit's actually fairly durable, because I crash it and I crash it and I crash it. And when it comes to test piloting, I'm great at testing durability because I crash all the time. But unfortunately, in this case, I don't have a really good, 4 or 5 minute flight I can show you. I have a bunch of non-crashing in air video, which I will show you, but this particular case, I don't have that. I plan to fly it more. I plan to swipe it over to those racecraft 3030s and do a bit more tuning and get it flying as the weather permits. But let's take a deeper dive. I'm going to remove everything. Let's look inside. Okay, I've removed just about everything, and we have a little clipping right up here that we need to pop that loose, and it comes out relatively simple. I'm actually kind of surprised that doesn't come off in crashes, but I never had the front part of the canopy lift off. And then we just kind of wiggle the front and wiggle the back and along this our antenna connector. Kind of work things back and forth, and eventually it comes pretty loose. Now I'm running an old orange 616 XN, and I just have a little piece of Duralock up here at the top that I've stuck that to. And I am running PPM because that's what I had on hand and available. You do get a cable, so you can run S-Bus, and they give you a battery strap as well. I wasn't crazy about that battery strap, so I never bothered to use it. Those loops through there, they drive me crazy. And I bought 25 of these RCX micro battery straps, so I'm going to use them all the time. So you can take a look here at what we've got on the inside. Our camera has a nice little neat plug, and they did use silicone wire all the way around. I appreciate that. And you can see our XT30 that's connected in here. And if we look, you could, if you wanted to leave the XT30, you could solder to these points right down here to get a different connector in. I just made an adapter for JST. I fly a lot of 3S because I'm flying in the backyard, and I find that 3S gives me enough punch. If you require more, you probably want to put an XT60 on the back. I don't know as far as the electronic or the ability to put amperage through those connectors, which is more. I would suspect the XT30 is considerably more, but I don't know that to be a fact. You can see we've got our VTX here, and we'll go through that here in a minute. And then we've got our stack for our ESCs down here below. Now, you are going to have to undo these screws down here at the bottom, and everything's recessed nice and flat on the bottom. The only thing that concerns me about that is if you strip one of these, finding one that's going to be fitting those holes perfectly. I think that might be a challenge. In my kit, I don't have anything like that. Mine are all standard where the screw heads would stick out from the frame. So that's one thing to consider. It's all recessed in here, and this one actually isn't even in all the way. I can feel that on my finger, and you can see I use Duralock here, and I just strap it down. I don't have any problems with the battery ejecting. This button is pretty much the only button, and as far as racing these, I think it would be a pretty big hassle because you're going to have to take your canopy off every time you want to change the channel, and the channel sequencing is a little bit wonky. And speaking of channel changes, we do get a set of instructions. It's relatively brief, but I think it's thorough enough. And if you speak that language, it's there for you as well. But if we look at the part that we were talking about here, it's kind of difficult to make this instruction English understandable. Configure transfer in the normal working state. Press the button for 2 seconds. Figure pass will enter the frequency of switch mode. This time the figure is transmitted to close the launch mode. Okay, so basically what it means is that we're going to use this button with different lengths of presses in order to change the band, the channel, and the frequency. And we'll plug it in here and take a look at that. Okay, I got my antenna connected here, so we should be all set and good to go. This is my 3S battery that I bought from HeliDirect. And you can see it's flashing A1. And we have the 1 dot down there in the bottom flashing 2 times, which means we're on 200 milliwatt. And I have a hard time getting my finger down in there, so excuse me if this isn't very easy to understand, but I'll try to be verbal as I do it. But we press this button, 1, 2, 3. So now we're changing the milliwatts. So I'm gonna just select 2 because that's fine for my instance. Press that down again, up. Saw it flash, then it saves, it tells us we're on A1. So now if I press again, C6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have different lengths of button presses that get you different results. And you can see we're on E1. So I want to change it to back to A1. All right, let's plug it into the computer and let's go through the Betaflight configuration, because it does come pre-flashed with Betaflight 301, and that's a great thing. I just wish they would also put some PIDs on there for us. I think we're going to find that more and more. We're seeing it on some of the larger quads, that they're coming a little bit better pre-tuned rather than the defaults or some odd configuration. So maybe they'll start to do that, maybe not. I mean, there's some things in me that hopes they do, for the sakes of people getting started, but I think tuning is one of those things that really helps you learn about how the vehicle flies and how you can make it fly differently. And if you don't get that experience, the tune that they put on there may not come as you want. So let's take a look at that now.
You can see the vehicle isn't quite flat, and that's because of my battery strap. You will want to calibrate your accelerometer first thing when you get it. If we jump over the ports tab, because I'm running PPM, I didn't need to turn on any of the serials. If you're running S-Bus, you'll need to turn on, I think it's UART3. If we look here at the configuration, you can see I did not flash multi-shot, so we're sticking with 1 shot. I use motor arm, and I set the minimum throttle at 1035. I found that the props spin nice and smooth, and that's a benefit of BLHeliS. We can have a min throttle value that's lower. And because I am using Spectrum, you see that 1024 is selected, as well as RX PPM. That gets my receiver working. You can see our loop times there. I didn't fuss with that. I did turn off, I believe it was black box and telemetry that were in there. Failsafe is set to stage 2 drop. And here's our PIDs. Take a look. You'll see my rates are kind of high. That's kind of how I like to fly. And I don't use angle. I use horizon when I'm wanting to fly in a stabilized mode, maybe for line of sight or something of that nature. I do think we could use a little throttle expo on this. I haven't done it yet. In my last few flights, I was really thinking about including some throttle expo. This vehicle is so light, and we'll weigh it here before we get to the flight footage I'll put together, but the vehicle is very light compared to a few others that I fly, and I found that my throttle control wasn't quite what I expected, even with 20 or so flights on this thing. So you might want to add a little bit of throttle expo and help in order to bring that under control. My receiver isn't hooked up, but oddly enough, AETR worked just fine. I'm normally selecting the spectrum on that. You can see that's all normal stuff. And here are my modes I set up on switches. We got an arm switch, we've got air mode, and horizon down there. And I think before it's all said and done, I'll probably add a beeper to this. I haven't actually wired the beeper in yet. And down here at the CLI, if we type version, we see that it's running 301. Let's go back to the desk and let's weigh this and a few of its comparables up and take one final look before we go outside.
Okay, we got our trusty scale set up here. Let's get a weight of this guy. Now I have some dirt that's still on there, so we might have 1/10 of a gram that's out of whack. Well, let me see if I can get that to behave a little bit more. $127 flat. Okay, now let's look at the Zerro 130. Tuck this back up in here. So 88.5, substantially lighter, and we would expect that. It's got much smaller motors on there. This one might be a challenge. Okay, now I've got a little stand. Let's try it this way. Looks like 92 flat on that one. Now, the next two I'm going to weigh aren't direct comparisons. These are quads you've got to build yourself, but they're in the same motor dimensions, 130 millimeter motor to motor, and they're also running 1306 motors. So let's see what the weight difference is there. This is the GB110, 180.3. Now this one does feature full VTX, power distribution board, flight controller, and it has a CCD camera. So we would expect that to be heavier, and it's also got a thicker carbon fiber bottom plate and also all this other carbon fiber and hardware. This is the Zerro 3, and I'll include links to these in the description. So if you want to investigate these further, this is actually a frame that I played a bit of a role in as far as its design goes. And it's one I enjoy the most, probably because it has this really low profile and it doesn't hardly take any damage when I crash it, and I do a lot of crashing. And this one is 160.8. So there you go. There are the weights. I think if you're looking to get into brushless quads, that this is a solid option. And I think that if you're a more experienced flyer, that you probably will like this one more than you would the Zerros, just because this one will provide more thrust. You'll also have a lot more props that you can find for this guy over this guy. There aren't that many prop options available with these T-props, I believe they're called. And most of them are fairly fragile. You see that this is an HQ prop, and these are probably the more durable props in this style versus these, which I think these might even be Zerro branded. These break pretty easily, actually. But the props that it came with are pretty durable. I really put them through the rigors. I crashed into the trees, as you saw from some of that crash footage. Let's take a look at how it flies.
Again, I want to stress that this is the final flight with the stock props. It's not my final flight with this. I'm sure I'll have a lot more fun with it. But I'm actually still tuning the PIDs. I will post what I have. I said this earlier, but I want to make sure everybody understands that this isn't a final PID tune for these props. This will get you going. It might be close. Maybe you could hate it. I do what I can to help out, and in this particular case, I think for me this flies fairly well. You may want to adjust your rates differently than I have them. I still think I need to add some more D in order to find a little bit of prop wash, and I also want to add some more P for the yaw, and there might be some minor value changes in other areas as well, but from what I've seen so far, this is relatively close. It should allow you to control the vehicle in a reasonable manner. And because I'm flying close in and there's very little vegetation left, the breakup isn't too terrible bad, but I do think if we put a different linear antenna on there, it would be better. I've flown with a number of different linear antennas in the backyard here, and this isn't great, but it's not terrible. And those punch outs, they're not full throttle punch outs. I'm actually testing to see if I can see those branches at the tops of the trees, and if I have a gap to shoot, or if I'm going to end up getting hung up way up there. It's a fairly nice day in this particular flight video, and it's reasonably warm. Oh! Fine. Okay, so now this is a flight earlier. So these PIDs aren't quite as good as the last flight that you just saw, but give you some more flight footage because I wasn't able to put together one decent run. I think you'll get probably over 5 minutes on a 450 mAh battery, as long as it's a reasonable, good performing battery. If you fly with a bigger battery, you'll probably get about a minute per 100 mAh, I think. It of course is going to vary depending upon your flying style. If you're in a big wide open space and you're hammering that throttle down and doing punch outs and S-turns and all sorts of things that you do in larger spaces, you may find that your flight time is less than what I'm proposing here. I am using the Fat Shark HD3s to record this with the LaForge modules, and we get a fair amount of breakup, but of course as we're watching this flight footage we see a lot more of the breakup than we actually notice when we're in the goggles. I do think, from what I have seen and from what I've heard from others, that the HD3s do a better job of recording what you actually see versus the traditional DVR footage is oftentimes worse. At least that's what we're all proposing. I haven't actually seen a test where they're doing a straight comparison between DVR footage versus what we see in the goggles. And I may do that one day, but we're getting really close to terrible weather time here in my neck of the woods, and going outside for long periods of time, it's not going to be happening soon. Matter of fact, we have snow predicted. We may see that, we may not, you never know. Sometimes the weatherman has it right, but sometimes they swing and miss too. But I like this vehicle, and again, if you are looking to get into the micro brushless arena, especially on a budget, I think this is a reasonable choice. I'm not going to say it's the best choice, but at the price point, it's hard to beat. If you want something that's better, you're going to have to open your wallet a bit more. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.